Since the dawn of time, people have told stories. First, they painted them on cave walls, then they etched them into temples. When the printing press came along, stories became more accessible and a central part of our culture. Some more so than others.
This evening, Muggles gone mad. Mere mortals and more than a few wizards and witches queuing up near and far for the midnight release of the final volume in the Harry Potter fantasy series.
Harry Potter sparked a cultural phenomenon, paving the way for the next generation of bestsellers. Books that weren't just stories, but global events. But today, it's not midnight releases that dictate book culture. It's TikTok, or rather, BookTok.
There are so many novels that TikTok has blown up.
But over the years, it seems one series has risen above the rest.
The name of the series, Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass. Throne of Glass. The Throne of Glass series.
Let's talk about Throne of Glass.
Hello everybody, and welcome to my very first reading vlog. I thought that I would try to kick it off strong and start with a very beloved series. We are doing Throne of Glass. I'm gonna try to get through it in the month of September, but that's a lot of books to get through in a month, and I haven't been doing very well lately on my reading. I just came out of a huge book slump that was through the summer months, and I only read like 4 or 5 books total in June through July. So reading 8 books in a month is gonna be tough, but you know what, we're gonna do it. I don't want to promise that. We might do it. That's the goal. This video is coming out at one point or another. So I've already read the first 2 books. The Assassin's Blade. The Assassin's Blade is a collection of novellas that follow our heroine, Celaena Sardothien, as she kind of becomes the character that we're going to know her as throughout the Throne of Glass series. And there's a lot of debate about when to read this book, whether or not to read it first or third in the series. I went ahead and read it first because it's a prequel. I haven't decided whether or not that was the right choice. I don't think I will know for sure until I finish Crown of Midnight and figure out what happens at the end of this book, because on the one hand, I'm glad that I read it first. I have the backstory of Celaena. I understand kind of what led her to the point of the start of the series, but also when I was reading the novellas, I couldn't turn off my mind in thinking, oh, what happened in Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight that Assassin's Blade is trying to tell me about? So I was constantly thinking, oh, this is this character is going to be important, or this is going to be important because of this, or we're going to run into this character later on in the series. And I don't know if that's true or not. I'm guessing that it is. I think I ended up giving The Assassin's Blade a 3.75. Yeah, I ended up giving The Assassin's Blade a 3.75, and I think it was just because it's a collection of novellas, so they're very quick. You don't have as much time to get to know the characters as you would a full book. I just felt like everything was rushed. It was still good. I was still entertained. I really liked getting to know the characters as I did, but like I said, I couldn't ever turn off that part of my brain of wondering what this was setting up in the next books. And I do wonder if I had waited and read The Assassin's Blade after The Crown of Midnight, if I would have been able to just enjoy the book more, finally understanding Celaena's backstory rather than wondering what the details of the stories were going to mean later on. I guess we'll never know. As for the Throne of Glass, I really enjoyed the Throne of Glass. I thought it was interesting. I did think it was drawn out a bit. Like, how much do I say? How much am I supposed to talk about without, like, giving away? See, my question is, do I tell you what happened at the end of The Assassin's Blade? Because if you didn't read it, then you don't know how it's going to end. But that's also the start of this book. Thoughts. I'm gonna get better at this the longer I do it. I know it. The general gist of the Throne of Glass is that Celaena Sardothien, which is the world-renowned assassin that we meet in The Assassin's Blade, has been invited to the castle to compete to become the king's champion. So what that means is she's going to fight against 22 others. I think there's 23 of them total, unless she's the 24th. I don't know. There's like 20-something other champions that she's going to be fighting against or competing against to earn this prestigious rank. She's going to stay an assassin, but under the king instead of her own business, I guess. Basically, it's a way of her earning her freedom. Apparently, being an assassin, even though it's like really great, still isn't legal in this world. If she doesn't become this king's champion, then she will have to, I don't know, work in a labor camp or die or something. Basically, it's her only choice. Throne of Glass follows her throughout this entire competition. It's a little Hunger Games-y. It kind of reminds me of Ender's Game a bit. Not really. Take that with a grain of salt. What does that even mean, take it with a grain of salt? Like, is that easier to wash down and like get out of your mind? It reminds me of Ender's Game in the way that they're kind of training and preparing and going through these tests to ultimately reach the end goal or whatever. So that's the gist of what the Throne of Glass is, and it was kind of slow in bits. The actual challenges were interesting, but there's also this mystery that's kind of happening behind the scenes that Selena has to go and figure out, and that part was interesting. I like that. I do worry that this series has been incredibly hyped up. I'm not putting all my eggs in this basket just this moment, because I've heard from multiple people that they also believe that The Throne of Glass is one of the slower books in the series. But I do worry that this series has been so hyped up that I'm not going to have that whole 5-star mind-blown feeling that everybody else seems to have, because I'm going into it expecting that. And I think things are better when you don't have any expectations for them. Some of my favorite 5 stars have been books that I hadn't heard of before, or I had no inkling of what they were about before I read them. I genuinely know nothing about this series. Like, nothing at all. Just the names of people, characters. I know nothing about those characters, but I've heard the names before. Like Dorian, Selena, Roland. It's gonna be embarrassing whenever I start pronouncing these names really wrong. Probably already did. Speaking of, kale. Is it kale? Like kale salad? Or is it like coal, but with like a cow? Like, I'm not really a fan of that name, if I'm being honest. Let's just skip ahead. I'm about halfway through The Crown of Midnight right now, and I think I like the beginning of it better than I'm liking the middle. The middle has really been dragging for me. Maybe that's because I'm trying to force myself to read 100 pages a day, at least, just to get through this quicker than I did the other two. Because so far, it's taken me a week each to read one of these. I normally judge a book based on how quickly I read it. Books that I read over the course of a couple weeks, I still really, really like. But books that I love, I will sit down and read in a day. Maybe 2. 3 days max for books that I love. And these have taken me a week each. Maybe that's circumstantial. Did I have anything going on this week? No, I don't think so. I hope it gets a little bit better. I'm not liking it. I do like it. I just feel like it's been overblown. Maybe. That's it for now. I have realized that I am really bad at the vlogging part of this whole experiment. So let's ignore the fact that this hasn't been atmospheric, this hasn't been cozy, and I'm sorry. This is my first vlog, officially. I did finish The Crown of Midnight last night. Here's my thinking about the series right now. It was good. The Crown of Midnight was good. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think that was less than what I gave Throne of Glass. I don't remember what I gave Throne of Glass, like 4.25 maybe. Where's my phone? I gave Throne of Glass 4.25 stars, and I'm giving Crown of Midnight 4 stars. And it wasn't that it was like that much worse. I just felt like there was more happening in Throne of Glass, what with the competition that Selena was competing in. And a lot of what the Crown of Midnight is the aftermath and what her life looks like now that she's won the competition. Surely that's not a surprise. I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna say spoiler, so that way you know to skip that if it's maybe a spoiler. I'm not exactly sure. There's like 8 books in this series. Surely you know that she makes it past the first book. But see, that is exactly my issue with the series. I tried to avoid spoilers like it was my job. Anytime I saw anything about Throne of Glass, I knew I wanted to read it someday, so I would just skip past it. I never read people's opinions. I never read anything about the characters. I mean, every now and then you'd read characters' names or something like that, or you'd see people pitting characters against each other and picking out their favorites. And I'm like, okay, sure, that doesn't tell me anything. But somehow, even with my avoidance, I've picked up enough about the series that by this point, by Crown of Midnight, I was not surprised at the end. I think part of that for me was the whole debate about when to read The Assassin's Blade, because people say, oh, read it first because it's a prologue, or read it third after The Crown of Midnight. And to me, that kind of gave away a bit of the ending of Crown of Midnight. The fact that the prequel could go third in the series rather than first tells me that something happens in the second book that changes the way the rest of the series is going to be read. And because of that, I figured, well, okay, so I wouldn't even say it was just that. It was that, and also the fact that, did this to myself, I tried to look up the character art. One of the characters was not featured, and another character was. And still no spoilers. If you've read the series, you know what I'm talking about. I saw what happened before it happened, and still a great book. Still good. Still interesting. I just kind of guessed it. But that's okay. But from this point forward, I have no clue. No clue what the series is about. I think I had to get past the third book to get to the point of where I'm like, okay, let's see what's going to happen now. I still think that this is still a kind of a setup, especially because of the way that this book ended. I think it's a setup for a lot that could happen, especially having read A Court of Thorns and Roses. Is it Thorns and Roses? I don't know. Just Sarah J. Maas's other books, the beginning is never really the beginning. The world gets bigger, plot gets stronger, the politics, the fantasy elements, all that stuff is going to get more interesting, and I know, I'm aware of that. But that just being said, gave it 4 stars, which is less than Throne of Glass, just because I felt like nothing was really happening through the majority of the book. I didn't really care for the romance, but I think also having seen some slight spoilers, I think I'm not alone in that. But I've also seen some people talking crap about certain characters that I also don't like that much. Not that there's anything wrong with them, they're just kind of boring. Boring characters. Boring dude. So now that I've finished Crown of Midnight, I'm going into The Heir of Fire, and this one is a lot thicker, and there is no shot that I will be getting through this series by the end of September like I thought I might. So I'm not even going to get through half of this series in September, which means all of October is going to be dedicated to the Throne of Glass. I just feel like it's almost sacrilegious that I'm not excited about Throne of Glass. It's just, I'm looking at this Tower of Dawn right now. I'm using all the books as my tripod because the tripod that I have is stupid. And it's like, it is a literal tower of books. I'm looking up at you under this tower of books. It's insane. This thick one. Oh, it's so thick and I'm just like, ah. But you know what? People are obsessed with it. I want to be obsessed with it. I'm excited for it. This is going to be great. It's just hard for me to think about how to do this without sharing any spoilers because I know that I wanted to know nothing going into this. But maybe if you're clicking this video from some no name you just saw on YouTube, maybe you actually want to know about the Throne of Glass. So maybe after this point of the pivotal moment of the Assassin's Blade or Crown of Midnight, whichever one you finished, maybe after this point, I can tell whoever doesn't want to know spoilers to stop right here and I'm going to get into it. That's an idea, 'cause then I can talk. Then I can tell you what I really think. That sounds like more fun to me. That sounds like something I can play with. We'll see.
Tune in next week for the spoiler-filled conclusion of the series.
It's getting good.
I feel like things between and are heating up in a weird way. I just don't know what that turns into.
Who was I to think I was going to get these books read in September? I know nothing. I am nothing. So close to a 5-star. So close. Let me tell you, I'm about to throw in the towel. The way that that wrapped up, the way that it ended, oh my gosh. I got so emotional. Tears streaming down my face. It makes me want to tear up right now. Oh, it's so good.